Instacart is on a mission to have you not leave the couch this basketball season. Because between the pre-game rituals and the post-game interviews, it can be difficult to find time for everything else. So let Instacart take care of your game day snacks or weekly restocks and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Because we hear it's bad luck to be hungry on game day. So download the Instacart app today and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days, excludes restaurants.
Hi guys, it's Hannah from Giggly Squad. With summer around the corner, I wanted to tell you guys how I'm staying comfy and stylish. Lululemon is my secret weapon. There are plenty of copycats out there, but nothing compares to the Lululemon fabrics and fit. I've literally had my pair of Lululemon leggings since college. And I'm out of college. I know I don't look it, but I am. The quality is next level. I especially love the Lululemon Align collection. It's made with this weightless, buttery soft Nulu fabric that feels like next to nothing. It's so soft. Whether you're in Align pants, shorts, a bra, tank, skirt, a dress, you get nonstop flexibility in every direction so you can stretch the summer limits. Align even wicks sweat. And as a sweaty girl, I love this. You know it's going to be my best friend when I play tennis this summer. Shop the Align collection online at lululemon.com or your nearest Lululemon store.
Hello and welcome to mini episode number 447 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have 3 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 6th of February 2025. And story number 1 comes from Katie. I'm deeply in love with anything paranormal and supernatural. And I recently made a new friend from work who is just as morbid as me, and I showed her what I call my ghost picture. And she immediately suggested I send it to you. Shout out to Brooklyn. Here's the story behind the picture. There isn't much of a story, but it leaves the mind to wander. One night, around 11 p.m, my girlfriend and I were leaving my parents' house to walk back to our own house, which is only a few streets away. As we started walking down the road, we noticed what looked like a UFO in the sky, but it was sadly just a satellite. We took 2 pictures, only a second apart. In the first one, you can faintly see the satellite in the sky, and you can barely make out our shadows. In the second one, it's a little more illuminated and you can really see the satellite, but off to the left corner, you can see what appears to be a figure. I'm including 3 pictures. The third is the second picture enhanced and circling the figure. We don't experience much paranormal stuff, even with my love for it. We have absolutely no clue who they might be. Hopefully they find their way. Oh, this ghost picture is so cool. If you can say that. You know, and I'm looking at the picture right now, and you can see the satellite in the sky. You can see the 2 shadows, and then it looks like there's a woman in the foreground. She seems to have long dark hair, kind of maybe a round neck dress or t-shirt or whatever on, but it definitely looks like a figure. I'm sure there's going to be people who are like, no, that's this, and there's, you know, some sort of logical explanation. But it does look like a figure, and I kind of love this picture. Obviously, like with all pictures, this will be on Facebook, Instagram, and on Patreon, so you can have a look at it yourself. I do think there's something quite unnerving about the fact that this picture was like sort of inconsequential. You know what I mean? You thought you saw a UFO and you were like, oh, it's a UFO. Oh no, it's a satellite. But you take a couple of pictures and then this figure just happens to show up. Like, how often are we in the vicinity of entities and spirits and ghosts and whatever, and we don't even realize that it's happening? You know, how often are we interacting with these spirits, or these spirits are trying to interact with us and we don't realize that it's happening? And that feels like a bit of a sobering thought, especially when you get those, you know, those shivers, like somebody's walking on your grave, you know, those kind of shivers, or you get those weird intuitive feelings when you go in somewhere. Like, what if it is all just entities that are trying to interact with us, and we're just not engaging with it because we can't engage with it? And then suddenly you have somebody snaps a picture of something completely different and you end up with a woman in the foreground of your picture that was not there when you took it. And story number 2 comes from Teri-Marie. Now, this is really cringe. Please don't judge me. I remember being around 4 or 5 years old and being in my grandparents' garden, jumping from a small garden wall, trying to summon my energy so I could fly like on Dragon Ball Z. This was my favourite show growing up. And as an adult, I now have a large Shenron tattoo, which I'm still very proud of in my 30s. Anyway, to the story. After a few times of really trying, I remember jumping from the wall, which was maybe 1 foot tall, and floating in the air for a few seconds before slowly lowering to the ground. I was dumbfounded that it had actually worked and stood there in disbelief for a good while before trying again. Unfortunately, try as I might, I wasn't able to do it again. Maybe more the power of a child's imagination rather than harnessing my ki. On another occasion, I remember being blown off my feet, like hanging onto a lamppost like in cartoons to prevent being blown by the wind, which again may say more for my imagination than anything else. One thing I do remember quite clearly was when we were on our first holiday abroad. I was maybe around 11. Here I remember swimming to the bottom of the pool and getting my fingers stuck in the grate at the bottom of the pool. Kids, don't stick your fingers in the grate at the bottom of the pool. And when I panicked, I couldn't get myself free and I suddenly realised it was okay because I could breathe underwater. I remember taking maybe 3 deep breaths before freeing myself and being able to swim to the surface. Again, I never got the feeling that I could have done that again, so I didn't try. Probably smart. It was very strange though. I remember the feeling of water in my lungs, but there was no burning, no desperate need for oxygen, just calm. And just as a warning, this next story is about pregnancy loss. Separately from these little anecdotes, I had been wanting to share a story for a while, and again, was recently inspired to share by the story of little Ricky. Although our experiences are not the same, it gave me a lot of comfort. When I was around 17, I had my first proper boyfriend. I was head over heels, and of course, things happen. I remember one night laying in bed having felt sick for some time and bloated, when I suddenly realised with panic that I had missed my period. At that moment in my mind's eye, I saw and heard my granny, who had passed away when I was around 7, talk to me and tell me that I was pregnant, but it will be okay, she will be there to help. During that night, I did end up suffering a miscarriage and remember waking up to the worst pain and bleeding I had ever experienced. I was taken to the hospital where I was questioned and treated, but nothing was to be done. I had lied at the time about the cause of the pain since I was embarrassed and had a very angry parent sitting next to me at the time, not realising of course how dangerous that could be. That night, I remembered my granny telling me it would be okay and I knew that she would take care of my little baby. I had visions of her smiling and holding a little bundle, which gave me so much comfort, because by this point it was impossible to not know or ignore what was going on in my body. The following week was hell, having to go through the worst of it alone, and it still hurts my heart to this day. But maybe we'll meet one day. For now, I know my little baby, who I never got to meet, is in good hands. This has been the only time I recall my granny ever visiting me after her passing, and I was very glad to receive it at the time that I did. Oh, that story really hurt my heart. Oh, and I'm sure there are people listening who have quietly gone through similar things, whether it was miscarriage or, baby loss and sort of quietly having to go through that on your own must be absolutely petrifying. And I am so glad that that was the time your granny came to you and said, I'm here, I will look after your baby, and that you had that comfort to hold on to at that time. And I can completely understand being 17 and, if I had been 17 and gotten pregnant, I know that I would have done anything to hide that. If I was having a miscarriage, I would have done anything to pretend that I wasn't, because I would have been terrified that I would get into loads of trouble. And I do hope that you take some comfort in the fact that your little baby is in good hands and that eventually you'll get to meet them at some point and it'll be a beautiful thing. And as for your first couple of stories, I'm just going to say, right, Dragon Ball Z, not cringe. I never watched it, But I was absolutely obsessed with Pokemon when I was a kid. So totally get it. Totally get the obsession. And when you're 5 years old and you're like, I want to fly, I want to summon energy or whatever it is, like in Dragon Ball Z, totally get it. And I believe this happened. I don't believe this was your childlike imagination, okay? I've decided, I believe that it happened, that you floated in the air, that the sheer will of a child can make you float. Okay? That's what I believe. And if you wanna have some proof of that, go onto my Instagram or my TikTok and look at the TikTok that I did about children floating down the stairs. There are so many stories of children who float down the stairs, fall from a great height and somehow feather float to the bottom. This is a real thing, okay? I'm sorry, it happens. I don't care what anyone says. Similarly, I want to believe that you were holding on to the lamppost and to stop yourself from being blown away by the wind. I don't care if it's cartoonish, okay? I want to believe that happened. And also, I did a story maybe last year about somebody who swam to the bottom of the pool and for whatever reason got stuck and they could breathe underwater, right? I did a TikTok about that too. The comments were flooded with people being like, I've had this too. Now, there were also people in the comments who were like, this is a sign that you're drowning. So that's less good. But listen, you lived to tell the tale, okay? So not only are you a bird, you were also a fish, you were also a human. So you're better than everybody else.
Hey, this is Josie Santi from the Every Girl podcast, and this episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's here, and Nordstrom has everything you need for your best dressed season ever. From beach days and weddings to weekend getaways and your everyday wardrobe, discover stylish options under $100 from tons of your favorite brands like Mango, Skims, Princess Polly, and Madewell. It's easy, too, with free shipping and free returns, in-store order pickup, and more. Shop today in stores, online at Nordstrom.com, or download the Nordstrom app.
Hi guys, it's Hannah from Giggly Squad. With summer around the corner, I wanted to tell you guys how I'm staying comfy and stylish. Lululemon is my secret weapon. There are plenty of copycats out there, but nothing compares to the Lululemon fabrics and fit. I've literally had my pair of Lululemon leggings since college. And I'm out of college. I know I don't look it, but I am. The quality is next level. I especially love the Lululemon Align collection. It's made with this weightless, buttery soft Nulu fabric that feels like next to nothing. It's so soft. Whether you're in Align pants, shorts, a bra, tank, skirt, a dress, you get nonstop flexibility in every direction so you can stretch the summer limits. Align even wicks sweat. And as a sweaty girl, I love this. You know it's going to be my best friend when I play tennis this summer. Shop the Align collection online at lululemon.com or your nearest Lululemon store.
Out here, we feel things. The sore calves that lead to epic views, the cool waterfall mist during a hot hike, and the breeze that hits just right at the summit. But hey, don't just listen to us. Experience it for yourself. All Trails makes it easy to discover the best of the outdoors, with more than 450,000 trails around the world, points of interest along the trail, and offline maps for always-on navigation. Download the free app today and find your next outdoor adventure.
This podcast is brought to you by Aura. By the time you hear about a data breach, your information has already been exposed for months. On average, companies take 277 days to report a breach. That's 9 months where hackers have access to your personal data. That's why we're thrilled to partner with Aura. Aura is an all-in-one digital safety solution that monitors the dark web for your phone number, email, and social security number, sending real-time alerts if your info is found. It also includes a VPN, password manager, and data broker removal to help keep you safe. For a limited time, Aura is offering a 14-day free trial plus a dark web scan to check if your personal information has been leaked, all for free at aura.com/safety. That's aura.com/safety to sign up and protect your loved ones. That's AURA.com/safety. Terms apply. Check the site for details.
And our final story today comes from Abigail. I'm a Kiwi, and in New Zealand, we love when anyone mentions us overseas. Over the years, you've read a few stories from here, and every time I listen extra hard for any clue for where they're talking about. So for my first story, I'm making sure I give some good location clues. Last year, my partner, myself and 2 friends decided to do a 3-day hike and bike in a fairly remote part of the top of the South Island, the Queen Charlotte Sound. It's the sort of place that's only accessible by boat, but has some wonderful lodges to stay at the end of each long day. We did it in the off-season as the other 3 were biking it while I was walking it solo. Because of this, I would start the day early, walk for 8 hours plus alone through spectacular scenery, bush, ridge lines, looking down to pristine ocean, beaches, never seeing anyone else on the track, apart from when the 3 aforementioned bikers passed me. It is an area steeped in history, pre-European Maori, early colonial and the meeting of 2 worlds. I had an amazing time, walking for hours with just my own company and podcasts. About 3 hours into day 2, after walking uphill for 2 hours, breaking the tree line to see the gorgeous views of the sounds, I started my descent back into the bush. After walking for about an hour in the dense forest, I suddenly felt like I was being watched, and I was not welcome. I kept looking up and behind me, waiting for anyone to appear. Another hiker, a local farmer. I don't know who I was looking for, but I knew it was a male energy. I continued following the path that wound downhill, all the while glancing up, waiting to see someone. I never did. I started saying out loud, "Hello, I'm Abigail. I'm just walking through, but I mean no harm." Then saying things like, "It's beautiful here. Thank you for letting me pass." After about 2 hours, I realised I no longer had that feeling anymore and I was relaxed again. Once I got home, I looked up the area again and saw there was a skirmish between Maori and Captain Cook's crew that led to a few deaths. I don't know who was checking in on me that day, but in my mind's eye, it was a male Maori warrior who was keeping an eye on a special place. My second story is completely different. When I was 20, I had a boyfriend who was a little aware of the other side. Once we were at my dad's house. My grandfather and dad were sitting side by side in armchairs while we were all chatting before dinner. After we left, my ex asked me who the little girl was that was standing between dad and grandpa. Later, we worked out that it was probably my dad's little sister, who died of meningitis as a toddler in 1949. My grandparents were of the generation who didn't talk of these things, so my ex didn't know of her. I barely did, as she was never mentioned. This has changed now and we speak of her often, and my grandparents are now both buried with her. That same boyfriend was in a show around that same time. We were both theatre kids, but I wasn't in this same show. He took me along to the first party the cast had. Emma, I know you know what it's like to go to a cast party. When you're in the show, it's the most fun. You have all the inside jokes, you sing, you dance, but when you're a +1 at a cast party, it's something different altogether. So this was the first party, the cast and crew still getting to know each other, and I knew no one. Eventually, my ex introduces me to a man in the cast. He's in his mid-30s, softly spoken, big singing voice. My ex tells me confidently, "This is Joe, he's psychic." Later, we are all sitting around, 10 or so people drinking and chatting. It's 2007, so no YouTube or Spotify. Suddenly, Joe turns to me and says, "Oh, there's a woman with you. She's small, she has a scarf, and a short 2-syllable name." I laugh awkwardly, thinking to myself, okay, that's a good guess for someone my age and ethnicity. Nothing special, sure. I have a great-grandmother named Hilda, and I was in the room at 6 weeks when she died. But that feels like an easy get with a bit of cold reading skills. Later, he turns to me again and says, "There's a young man in your life. He's kind and sensitive, and there is a man in his life who has a problem with his liver and works in..." He starts miming that he's pulling a 2-way radio down from the roof and pushing the button on the side. This one made me pause. I have a younger half-brother who at this point would have been about 12. His father was an alcoholic who owned a commercial trucking trailer company, you know, the sort with radios on the ceiling of the cab. He died recently, falling down the stairs drunk. My kind, sensitive brother is deep in inheritance conflict with his awful family. Again, not convinced, as we lived in a medium-sized city, so there is a chance he knew my connection to this man. The third time he looked at me and he laughed. He said, "Okay, so this one is strange. You've a cat following you." This stopped me in my tracks. 8 or so years earlier, we had lost our family cat. He had adopted us when I was 4, when my parents had split and our cat showed up at the house my mum moved to. Joe says, "It's a really big white cat with an intense stare." This really got me. We had always assumed that Fluffball was probably part Maine Coon from the size of him. He was silent except for a squeak at the top of each meow. As kids, all of our friends would complain about the way Fluffball would stare at them. I adored him. He was a constant, a calm in a complicated young life. So when Joe said he was following me long after he died, I was so happy. And still, at 37, I'm comforted by the thought that Fluffball was with me. Now sure, my ex could have said some of this stuff to him, but at this point they'd only known each other for a few weeks, so it seems unlikely that they would talk about me and my cat and my brother in that time. My last story is from just a week ago. My father passed away at home after a long cancer battle. We were very close and it was a tough weekend. On Thursday, my mother called to say that he had had a fall and had decided not to have more intervention, so we went back to my hometown. It's important to note that my mother, my stepmother and my father had all grown close over the past few years, especially around Dad's illness and Mum's medical expertise. So over the weekend we were all around him at home as he slowly declined. On the last night, at around 4 a.m, I woke after sleeping on the couch next to Dad's bed. My mum and stepmother were sitting on either side of Dad, each holding a hand, talking quietly to each other and to Dad. They were both saying things like, "It's okay, you can go, just let go." As an aside, I heard my mother say that people often go between 4:30 and 5:30 a.m. She works in palliative care. So after a while I got up and took over holding his hand. There was a window in front of me, looking out into the pitch black backyard. It was likely my eyes were playing tricks on me, tired from a few days of little sleep and high emotion, but I was sure I could see the outlines of people standing in the backyard. I wasn't scared. I felt calm, and sure it was my lovely grandparents coming back to pick Dad up. The day before, in a semi-lucid state, Dad had said, "Mummy?" to a corner of the room. Dad was 76 and Grandma had died 8 years earlier at 98. My partner and I left at 6 a.m. to go back to my mum's to sleep. I knew I was saying goodbye, and 5 hours later we were called to say that he had passed. I haven't seen or felt Dad since he passed. I sort of hope I don't. To paraphrase one of my favourite films, Casper, I hope he was loved too well when he was alive, that he has no unfinished business. Oh, I think all any of us can hope is that we were loved too well when we were alive. What a beautiful sentiment. And I'm really sorry that you lost your dad. Grief and loss is such a hard thing, even after a battle with an illness, you know. You can have all the time in the world to try and come to terms with something, but it's never going to make ultimately death any easier, you know. And I've definitely spoken about this on the podcast before, but I have a friend who had a family member in a similar situation pass away in the house, and the palliative care nurse sat them down and said, "You know, I've done this for a long time, and it is very common for people who have already passed on to come and collect their loved ones. So there might be strange things that happen. You just don't be frightened. It is what it is." And strange things did happen. You know, that night there were voices heard calling the name of the loved one, a nickname that hadn't been used for years. And there were the smell of flowers and roses, like beautiful things. And I think it's such a comforting thought to think that the people that we've loved and lost will come and get us in the end. And I often get emails and messages and comments from people who say, you know, I've lost a loved one, and why haven't they left me a sign? Maybe they don't feel like they need to. You know, maybe they're just there quietly in the background, just keeping an eye. And that's a pretty beautiful thought too, to think that you've got this sort of quiet, ethereal safety net that's behind you. And I'm kind of loving that thought at the moment. And you know what, Abigail, right? I have to say, going back to your story about the cast party, when you're not in the cast, a cast party is one of the worst places to be in the world, because you end up, you know, the cast are like, oh my God, do you remember that time that Sean dropped his cue and it was so funny, ha ha ha, and everybody has in jokes and you're quoting bits from the show, and when you're not involved, you're like, oh, this is really boring actually. So I totally get it. Right, totally get it. And it's really interesting that this man, this guy was there that claimed to be psychic, and I totally see what you mean. You know, you can take a good stab that people of a certain age will have lost grandparents, right? There's things that you can kind of take a stab at and take a guess at. And I've had numerous experience with alleged psychics over the years who have done a lot of cold reading, and I would say cold reading very well. And I'm not saying, like, I firmly believe that the people that I've seen believe they themselves are psychics, and there's sometimes I think you're just very good at cold reading, and that's okay too, right? The being able to say, you know, you've got a half brother and his dad, you know, had problems with his liver, and, you know, kind of miming the radio in the truck or in the trucks. Like, again, that is weird. It's weirder. But I see what you mean about being like, look, we live in a semi-small place. Like, you know, there's a possibility that he would have just known. But there are no lies when it comes to guardian pets. There is no cold reading, okay? Because I want to know that the pets that I've loved and lost are looking out for me and still follow me around, okay? I want to know that. We all want to know that. I want to know that they are happily padding around in the afterlife, and every so often they pop up to check in on you. That's all I want to know. And I'm choosing to believe that that is true and that is real. And as for your first story, like, I truly believe there are places that feel more special and more magical. I truly, truly believe that. And if I can't, you know, I can't even imagine if you're a Maori warrior in life and you fought and gave your life to try and protect your home from invading people, from colonizing people. You're trying to protect your home. That place is so important to you. Of course you would look after it in the afterlife. Of course you would. And I really do feel like there are places where you can just feel that magical energy and that protection. You know, whatever that means, whether that is an actual entity, like an entity of an individual person, or whether that's just the land itself retaining all that energy, I don't know. But I do think it's important to do what you did, Abigail, and just kind of recognise and respect the fact that things happened on that land. People died for that land, and it's important. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Katie, Teri-Marie and Abigail for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 6th of February 2025. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
This is Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad. Opill is a game changer for sexual reproductive health. They're the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Finally, the days of needing a prescription to get birth control are over. Opill is FDA approved, no prescription needed, full prescription strength, estrogen-free, and available online and at most major retailers. So when there's no prescription, no appointment, there's no hassle. No more waiting at the doctor's office to get a prescription. Opill will be easily accessed over the counter, in store, or online, and will be ready for when you need it. Opill is available online and at most major retailers. Use code GIGGLY for 25% off your first month of Opill at opill.com.